The envelope was sitting on the kitchen counter when I walked in. My daughter's handwriting on the front, neat and controlled, the way she writes when she wants something to look casual but has rehearsed it 3 times. Inside was a budget, categories in 2 columns, totals circled at the bottom, and next to my name, 1 word underlined twice. Confirmed. I had not confirmed anything. I stood in my own kitchen holding a document that committed my wallet to a celebration I had not been asked to attend as a guest in 5 years, and something behind my ribs became very still. That stillness would turn out to be the beginning of everything. To understand what happened that Christmas Eve, what happened at 6 o'clock when the whole careful machinery finally stopped, I need to take you back to the fall. My name is Robert Calloway. I am 67 years old. I live in a town called Briar Hill in the northwest corner of Virginia, the kind of place where the post office closes at noon on Wednesdays and everyone knows which pew you sit in at church. I drive a 1994 Ford pickup that still starts on the first turn because I rebuilt the engine myself. My dog is a 10-year-old basset hound named Arthur who follows me from room to room like a shadow with ears. I eat the same breakfast every morning. 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, black coffee in a blue mug with a chip on the rim. I sit in the same booth at the Briar Hill Diner, the one nearest the window where Helen brings me coffee without asking. I fix things for people. A leaking faucet for the widow down the road. A stuck garage door for the retired teacher on Maple Street. A fence post that leans wrong after a storm. I show up with my tools. I do the work and I leave. I do not send a bill. I do not stay for conversation unless they need it. Most of the time they just need a man who knows how to make something work again. That is what I am good at, making things work. Quietly and without ceremony. Nobody in Briar Hill knows what I did before I came here. They know me as the quiet man with the old truck and the slow dog, and I have always preferred it that way. Some men wear their past on their chest. I buried mine in a cedar chest in my closet. Under a folded flag and a stack of letters I cannot bring myself to read anymore. That chest smells like something between a forest and a funeral. My wife Margaret died 11 years ago, pancreatic cancer. The doctors found it in April, and by September the woman who had danced with me in the kitchen on Sunday mornings could not lift her own coffee cup. I fed her with a spoon those last weeks. She never complained. She just looked at me with those brown eyes that still had light in them and said the things she always said when the world was falling apart. The people who love you quietly are the ones holding the walls up, Robert. You just have to let them. She said it when our daughter scraped her knee at 7. She said it when I came home from my 3rd deployment with hands that shook for a month. She said it the night before she died, barely louder than breathing. After Margaret was gone, I learned what silence really sounds like. It is not the absence of noise. It is the presence of every sound that used to mean something. The coffee pot clicking off when no one is waiting for the second cup. The creak of a floorboard in the hallway where her footsteps used to be. The moment every night around 9 when I catch myself turning to say something to an empty chair. I reached across an empty bed for 3 years before I stopped reaching. Even now, some mornings I set 2 mugs on the counter and stand there looking at the second one before I put it back. Grief is not a thing that leaves. It just learns to sit in the corner without speaking. The house smelled different after she died. Not worse, just emptier. Like the walls themselves had exhaled. My daughter Sarah is 41 years old. She is the only child Margaret and I ever had. Sarah is smart, organized, the kind of woman who can walk into a room and rearrange everyone in it without raising her voice. She inherited her mother's beauty and my stubbornness, and somewhere along the way she learned how to manage people the way you manage a project. Her husband is a man named Victor, 39 years old, tall, firm handshake. He sells commercial real estate, big deals, long lunches, the kind of career where confidence is the product. When Sarah first brought him home 6 years ago, I wanted to like him. He brought a bottle of wine. He asked about my truck. He even scratched Arthur behind the ears, which softened me because Arthur does not take to strangers. Margaret would have seen through him in 10 minutes. I took almost 3 years. The first thing I noticed was small enough to forget. Thanksgiving, our second one together, Victor was telling a story about a deal he had closed. I said a comment about the neighborhood he was describing, which I happened to know because I had wired 3 buildings on that block 20 years earlier. Victor paused. He looked at me the way you look at a child who has interrupted the teacher. "That is a nice thought, Robert," he said. "But this is a little different from fixing light switches." The table laughed. Sarah laughed. I smiled because smiling was easier than explaining and because Margaret had always told me to give people room. So I gave him room. I had no idea how much room he would take. A man who dismisses you in your own house will do it again. The only question is how far he will go. At Christmas that same year, Victor stood in my living room looking around with that appraiser gaze he carries everywhere. "Nice place," he said. "Very cozy. You could probably get a decent price if you ever wanted something more manageable." I was standing in the home I built with my own hands, the home where my daughter took her first steps, the home where Margaret died holding my hand in the bedroom down the hall. He was suggesting I sell it the way you suggest someone trade in an old car. Sarah touched his arm. "You mean something smaller might be easier for you, Dad, less to maintain." I said the house was fine. I said it calmly, but something cold settled in my chest that afternoon, like a draft coming through a wall you thought was solid. At a birthday dinner the following spring, Victor snapped his fingers at a waitress who had not refilled his water fast enough. It was not loud. It was not a scene. But the sound of that snap carried a weight that made my jaw tighten. I watched the waitress flinch and smile and keep moving. A man who snaps at a stranger will eventually snap at someone you love. That is not a theory. That is a pattern I have watched play out across 30 years and 2 continents. If this story is already settling into you, if something in what I am describing feels familiar, I hope you will stay with me. Subscribe to this channel so stories like this keep reaching the people who need to hear them. I noticed that Sarah stopped calling during the week. Where she used to phone Tuesdays and Thursdays, she now called only on Sundays, and the calls were shorter, and she always seemed to be checking over her shoulder before she spoke freely. I noticed she wore long sleeves in August when the heat was thick enough to taste. I noticed she flinched, just barely, when Victor raised his hand to adjust his collar at the dinner table. The flinch lasted less than a second. Most people would not have seen it. I am not most people. I spent 22 years in military intelligence. I spent 8 of those years in the field reading body language the way other men read newspapers. I know what a flinch means. It means the body remembers something the mouth will not say. I sat with that knowledge for weeks. I drove home and sat in my truck in the driveway with the engine off and the cicadas screaming in the trees, and I stared at the steering wheel until my hands ached. Yet even then I held still. Because Margaret had taught me patience, and because I kept hoping I was wrong, and because the worst thing a father can do is see a monster where there is only a difficult man, and Victor was not always difficult. That is what made it hard. I watched him carry my granddaughter Sophie on his shoulders through the apple orchard, her laughter ringing like a bell, and he looked like a man who understood what mattered. I watched him fix a flat tire for a stranger without being asked, and I thought maybe I was the problem. Maybe a lonely old man with a dead wife sees shadows where there is only ordinary imperfection. None of us knew what the next 4 months would bring. The budget appeared in October. Sarah had let herself in while I was walking Arthur. Inside was a spreadsheet for the annual Christmas Eve gathering at the Briar Hill Community Hall. My name appeared in the funding column next to a figure that made my coffee go cold. $4,700. Confirmed. I sat at that table a long time after I finished reading it. Arthur pressed his head against my ankle, and I reached down and held his ear the way Margaret used to hold my hand, gently, because some weight needs somewhere to go. I had paid for Christmas before. Every year since Margaret died, it started small. The first year after the funeral, I paid for the turkey because nobody else offered, and Margaret had always done the cooking. The second year, I covered the venue because Sarah said her apartment was too small. The third year, I paid for everything because Sarah said, "Daddy, it would mean so much if you could handle this while I focus on the planning." And year after year, the amount grew and my role shrank. I went from hosting to funding, from family member to financial sponsor, from a man at the table to a man behind the bill. Nobody ever asked who paid. That was the part nobody asked. For Sarah, the celebration simply appeared each year. The hall was booked. The caterer arrived. The lights went up. Magic, more or less. She took the credit in front of the neighbors, and I let her, because what father does not want his daughter to shine? But never once in 5 years had anyone put the word confirmed next to my name without asking me first. That word sat in my chest like a stone. The second incident came 2 weeks later, Sunday. Sarah had asked me to bring folding chairs to her house. I walked around the side toward the back patio. The October air was cold and smelled like wet leaves. Victor was standing there with two neighbors, the Martins. He had a beer in his hand and that performing voice. I stopped at the corner. They did not see me. Every year it runs smoother, Victor was saying. Sarah has a real system. One of the Martins said, how nice the party always was. Victor nodded. Between you and me, he said, it is a lot easier when the old man is not involved. He just gets in the way. We handle everything. He just writes the check and finds something to ruin. I heard laughter. Then I heard my daughter's voice. Sarah was standing right beside him. She laughed along, warm and easy, and did not say one word to correct him. I stood at the corner of my daughter's house holding 4 folding chairs and felt something that had been building for 5 years settle gently into place. Not rage. I want to be honest with you because I have thought about that moment 1,000 times since then. I was not angry. I keep waiting even now to feel the fury, and it never quite arrives. What I felt was clarity. For the first time in years, I could see everything from top to bottom without fog. We handle everything. The old man just gets in the way. I set the chairs against the fence in silence. I did not announce myself. I walked back to my truck and drove home without turning on the radio. The road was empty and the trees were going gold and orange against a gray sky, and none of it registered. That night I sat at my kitchen table and pulled every receipt, every canceled check, every bank statement going back 5 years. I am a man who understands numbers. Numbers do not laugh at you. Numbers do not put you at the end of the table. The total glowed on the calculator in my dark kitchen. I will not say the exact figure, but it was enough to buy a new truck, a good one, or to make a serious dent in the retirement my doctor kept telling me I deserved. I had handed it over piece by piece and called every piece love. And in 5 years of paying, how many times had I felt like a father at that table and not a wallet with a pulse? I could not remember one, not one. That night, I decided I was not going to fight. I was not going to make a scene. I was simply going to stop. This year, I would not appear. Every payment would stop, but I would do it right. I would warn the vendors. I would not leave anyone stranded. The next morning, I opened the cedar chest. The smell hit me like a hand against the chest. Cedar and old paper and something that might have been the ghost of Margaret's perfume. I held the folded flag for a while. I remembered her words. The people who love you quietly are the ones holding the walls up. I had been holding the walls up for 5 years. Nobody had noticed. It was time to step back and let everyone see what happened when the quiet man stopped pushing. I called my old friend Thomas that afternoon. We served together for 9 years. I told him everything. The budget, the patio, the laughter. Thomas listened the way a man listens who has spent decades in rooms where listening is the difference between life and death. When I finished, he set his coffee down. You know what you have to do, he said. Do it clean. No anger. Let the situation speak for itself. Margaret would be proud of you. Before I continue, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell me what city you are watching from. I read every single one, and knowing you are out there keeps these stories alive. Monday morning I made the calls. The community hall. A woman named Grace answered. I am the account holder for the Callaway reservation, I said. I would like to cancel my booking and remove my payment information. Mr. Callaway, you have held this reservation for years. Are you certain? I am certain. But my daughter Sarah Davis is the organizer. If she wants the hall, she can book it herself with her own card. I made the same call to the caterer, the decorator, the bakery, the photographer. Cancel my account. If my daughter wants the order, she arranges it herself. It took less than 2 hours. 5 years of silent funding undone in less than 2 hours at my kitchen table with Arthur sleeping at my feet. Sarah called Wednesday evening. "Hi, Dad. The caterer wants the menu confirmed and the hall needs the head count. Can you handle both?" "I cannot," I said. She laughed. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I will not be coming to Christmas this year, and I have reorganized my finances. Whoever organizes pays." The line went silent. "What did you say?" "The hall, the caterer, the decorations, all of it has come from my account for 5 years. I have canceled my reservations. If you want the party, book it yourself." "Dad, you cannot just. Do you want to ruin Christmas for the children? I do not want anyone unhappy. I want to stop paying for a celebration where I am only invited to fund it. That is so unfair after everything we do for you." "The hall will need to hear from you if you want the date," I said. "Call them tomorrow." I wished her good night with warmth. Then I set the phone on the counter and watched it light up again and again. By Thursday, she had called the cavalry, cousins I had not heard from since summer. Every message wore the same coat. "We are worried about you, Robert. Sarah is devastated. Do not let pride ruin the holidays." One cousin said it directly. "Selfish at your age over money." I sat in my armchair and felt the old thing climb my spine. The guilt. For almost an hour, I nearly gave in. "Just pay it, Robert. Keep the peace." That was the voice that had cost me 5 years. My thumb moved toward Sarah's name. Then my phone buzzed. "Thomas, do not back down now. You have earned this." I set the phone in my lap. My hands were shaking. I did not call Sarah. I sat in the silence and let the phone ring itself dark. Victor appeared Friday night, his fist on my door, harder than necessary. "We need to talk, Robert." He stood in my living room, looking around like he was calculating the listing price. "You are embarrassing this family. Sarah is falling apart. You made a commitment. Every year, the same arrangement. What commitment did I make? Victor, you always pay. Everyone knows it." "Assuming is different from agreeing," I said. His face went red. "The contracts have names," I said. "Whoever has the name pays. That is how it works. You just never had to read them." He stepped closer. "Sarah carries this entire family. Then she can carry Christmas too," I said quietly. He looked at me like the furniture had started talking. I walked to the door and opened it. Cold December air rushed in, smelling like pine and frozen earth. "Good night, Victor. Drive safe." He left. There was nothing left to say to a man who had run out of yeses. I asked Thomas to go to the party as a guest of a neighbor. I wanted an honest witness. He told me later at my kitchen table, and I will tell you the way he told me. At 5:45, the hall looked the way it always looked. Warm light on fresh snow, a tree in the corner. The neighbors arrived. Sarah performed her role, greeting people, taking coats, laughing at the right moments. But Thomas watched the edges. Grace from the hall office stood near the bar holding a folder. Sarah had scraped together the deposit, but the balance was due that night. A waiter asked who would settle the bill and got a tight smile and no answer. My chair sat empty at the end of the table near the door. Thomas said people kept glancing at it, asking where Grandpa Robert was. Sarah kept saying I was not feeling well. At 5:58, Grace cornered Sarah near the bar and opened the folder. And across town in my quiet kitchen, my phone lit up. At 6:00, the first call came. The hall. I let it pass. The caterer. I let it pass. Sarah. I watched her name glow and pulse. I let it pass. Then they came faster. Victor, a cousin, Sarah again. The phone barely went dark between them. I made myself a sandwich. A man has to eat even the night his whole life rearranges itself. Around 6:15, Thomas called. "You need to come here," he said. "I already said everything. This is not about the money. Something is unfolding. You should hear it yourself. What is happening?" Sarah's about to find out she is alone for the first time in her life. And the neighbors are about to find out who really gave them 5 Christmases. You have earned the right to be in the room. Do not give it away hiding in your kitchen. "You are not coming to pay," he said. You are coming to be seen. I drove through the snow without my wallet. I left it on the counter on purpose. For once I was only bringing myself. I opened the door. The room turned. Sarah was by the bar, pale. Grace beside her with the folder open. The Martins close enough to have heard everything. Victor hovering behind his wife. Sarah saw me, and something crossed her face. Relief. As if the cavalry had arrived. Dad, tell them there has been a misunderstanding. Tell them you will fix this. I stood just inside the door with snow melting on my shoulders. There is no misunderstanding, I said. Calm. The room leaned in anyway. You are ruining Christmas, she said. You always ruin Christmas. 5 years of it. Said out loud in a full room. I did not ruin anything, I said. I simply stopped paying for a party I was never truly invited to. The room went so still you could hear the hum of the rented lights. Then from near the back a voice spoke. It was Grace, the woman from the hall office. She was not trying to make a scene. She was just trying to do her job, and she was confused, and confusion makes people honest. I am sorry, she said, looking between me and Sarah. I just need someone to settle the balance for tonight. She hesitated. Then she added the thing that changed the room. I mentioned to Mrs. Martin when she booked that this was the first year in our records the account was not under her father's name. Every previous Christmas, Mr. Calloway paid for the entire evening himself. The venue, the catering, everything. I just assumed. She did not finish. She did not need to. The room did the math out loud in a dozen silent faces at once. I watched it move through them. The Martins who had heard Victor boast on the patio that the old man just got in the way. The cousins who had sent me messages with the word selfish. Friends who had spent 5 years congratulating Sarah on a beautiful party. All of them turned slowly to look at the empty chair at the end of the table, the one near the door, the one with my name, and then they turned to look at me. I said nothing. This was the kind of moment you ruin if you talk over it. Then Thomas stepped forward. I have known Robert Calloway over 30 years, he said quietly. He served his country for 22 years in ways most of you cannot imagine. He buried his wife and kept his family together by paying for everything and asking for nothing. He looked around the room, and you put him at the end of the table and called him the problem. Victor's face fell. The neighbors he had performed for had just discovered who carried what he claimed. He looked at the Martins. The Martins looked at the floor. So this is how it will be from now on, I said. Whoever organizes, pays. And I will keep coming if you want me as a father, not as a checkbook. I turned toward the door. The snow was falling soft and clean. No one stopped me. Not a single person reached for my arm. And walking into that cold, lighter than I had felt in 5 years, I realized something. For once I had kept Christmas by letting it go. The party did not recover. People left within the hour. Sarah paid what she could and put the rest on a plan. The full weight of one Christmas falling on the woman who had taken credit for 5. The story moved through Briar Hill the way stories do. By New Year, the version was not Robert ruined Christmas, but did you hear what they did to that man? The Martins sent a card. We are sorry for what we assumed. You always seemed like a good man. Now we know why. Victor went quiet. The thing about a man who lives on, the impression he makes is that the neighbors he performed for were the same ones he hoped to sell houses to someday. He had spent that currency on a careless sentence on a patio, and it did not come back. I spent that Christmas Eve at my own small table with Thomas eating turkey breast on paper plates with a little tree glowing in the corner. It was the best Christmas I could remember. Then, 2 days after Christmas, Sarah called. Can I come over? Just me. She sat at my kitchen table and for a while said nothing. I saw the numbers, she said, all of them. I never knew, Dad. I know. I made it easy for you not to. Victor is furious. Not with himself, with me. Says I made him look foolish. I do not know how to do this, she admitted. I do not know how to plan a Christmas I pay for. I am 41 and I have never done it. I felt it then. Not vindication, the sad truth. I had done this. Not the cruelty, that was his, but the incapacity. I had carried so long my daughter never learned to stand. I called it love, and it crippled her. You will learn, I told her. It is not too late to learn. She looked at me like she wanted to believe me. After she left, the old voice came back. She is struggling. She came to you. Why not help just this once? I sat in the dark with that voice. It is persuasive. I even opened my banking page. 3 taps and I would be the man who fixed it again. But that voice was not love. It was the hook that kept me trapped. Thomas messaged, do not do it. Whatever you are thinking, do not. The hardest part was not the confrontation. It was standing alone in my kitchen and not rescuing my daughter from a lesson she needed. Love sometimes means letting the people you love stand on their own feet even when every part of you wants to catch them. The crack between Sarah and Victor did not stay quiet long. Some things, once they break, keep breaking. There was a fight, a real one, the kind that does not smooth over by morning. It started about the bill. Of course it did. Victor wanted to know how Sarah planned to fix the mess. Sarah reminded him he was the one who opened his mouth on the patio. A marriage built on someone else's wallet thins fast when the wallet closes. They were living apart by the time the leaves came back. The following Christmas looked nothing like the 5 before it. No rented hall, no catering bill, no hired decorations, no lights hung by a company. There was my house, the one I had kept warm for everyone else all those years, finally warm for me. I cooked the turkey myself the way Margaret used to, guessing at half the steps as I went. Thomas came early and stayed late and took over my kitchen, which felt exactly right. And Sarah came. She came with a dish she had made herself, a little crooked, and she came with empty hands and no demands, no folder, no budget, no task. Just my daughter, quieter than I had ever seen her, asking if she could help set the table. Things were not fixed. I want to be honest with you about that. You do not undo 5 years with 1 turkey. There was a tenderness between us, a care that still had bruises underneath, but she was learning. She had organized a small birthday for her children that fall and paid for it herself and called me to tell me about it, proud as a child. And I had been proud too. That Christmas I sat at the head of my own table, not because I had paid for it, but because my family put me there. The grandchildren ran around the little tree. Thomas told a story that made everyone laugh until they choked. The snow fell outside the same way it always does, and no one, not once, the whole evening, called me the man who ruins Christmas. Late that night, Sarah found me by the window. We stood watching the snow. I owe you more than I can say, she said quietly. Thank you, Dad, for all those years. I never said it. I never even saw it. I am sorry it took losing it to see you. Nothing behind it. No favor, no project, no balance. Just a daughter thanking her father 5 years late. I forgive you, I said. Not because she earned it with a perfect apology, but because carrying it weighed more than letting it go. She cried a little. I put my arm around my daughter, and for the first time in 5 years, it did not cost me a cent. And it was worth more than every check I ever wrote. This is what I learned. When I was young, I thought strength meant carrying everything alone without complaint. The war taught me that strength means knowing which fights are yours. And growing old finally showed me the truth that Margaret knew all along. The people who love you quietly are the ones holding the walls up. The greatest strength is letting the people you love feel the weight of their own choices so they can learn to carry them. That is not cruelty. That is the deepest love a quiet man can offer. If this story stayed with you tonight, if it reminded you of someone holding the walls up without anyone noticing, share it with them. Subscribe so you never miss a story. And leave a comment telling me which moment hit you the hardest. Sometimes the people who need these words the most find them through you. Take care of yourself, and do not spend another Christmas being someone else's checkbook.